There's a rock hammer sitting in a museum in London, Texas, and it is driving archaeologists crazy. Not because it is broken, not because it is fake, but because it was found sealed inside a rock formation, estimated to be over 500 million years old. 500 million years? That is 300 million years before dinosaurs. The hammer itself is made of iron and wood, two materials that require advanced human craftsmanship to produce. Official science says modern humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years. So either the dating is wrong, the hammer is a modern intrusion that somehow got sealed in ancient rock, or something happened on this planet that we are not being told about, and this hammer is just the beginning. 8 discoveries, 8 artifacts, structures, and sites that do not fit what we were taught in school. Some of them have been studied by universities. Some have been buried in museum basements. All of them share one thing in common. They should not exist. If this kind of content hits different for you, smash that subscribe button right now. We cover the history they do not put in textbooks, and we are just getting started. Let us go back to 2001. A team of researchers off the coast of Cuba, led by ocean engineer Polina Zalitsky, was using side-scan sonar equipment near the Guanahaca-Baibes Peninsula. They were mapping the seafloor for a Canadian exploration company called Advanced Digital Communications. What they found stopped everyone on the ship cold. Perfectly symmetrical stone structures, sitting at roughly 650 meters below the surface. The formations covered an area of about 2 square kilometers. Smooth granite blocks arranged in what appeared to be streets, pyramids, and circular patterns. Geologists who reviewed the sonar data said the formations looked unlike anything produced by natural geological processes. For structures to be at that depth today, they would have had to have been on dry land at least approximately 10,000 years ago, possibly closer to 50,000 years ago. No known human civilization existed 50,000 years ago with the engineering capacity to build stone cities. Mainstream archaeology responded with near total silence. The Cuban underwater city, as it became known, was visited briefly, examined, and then essentially shelved. Polina Zalitsky spent years trying to get funding to return. The ocean kept it secret. The Antikythera mechanism was pulled from a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera in 1901. It was a lump of corroded bronze that sat ignored in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens for nearly 50 years, before anyone understood what they were looking at. When X-ray technology was finally applied to it in 1972 by physicist Derek de Solla Price, the world got its first real look inside. What was hiding in that corroded lump was a fully functioning analog computer. 37 interlocking bronze gears precisely calibrated to track the movements of the sun, the moon, the Saros eclipse cycle, the Metonic cycle, the positions of at least 5 planets, and the 4-year cycle of the ancient Greek games, including the Olympics. The device dates to somewhere between 150 and 100 BCE. Nothing remotely comparable in mechanical complexity appears in the historical record for the next 1400 years. Nothing. The concept of a gear-driven calculating machine simply should not exist in the ancient Greek world according to the standard timeline. The Antikythera mechanism forced historians to completely revise their understanding of ancient Greek technology. And even then, most schoolbooks still do not mention it. The Saqqara bird was discovered in 1998 during excavations of a tomb at Padi Imen in Saqqara, Egypt. It dates to approximately 200 BC and is made of sycamore wood. It weighs just 39 grams and is carved in the shape of a bird. Except when Egyptian aviation researcher Khalil Masiha first analyzed it, he noticed something wrong. The tail is vertical. Real birds do not have vertical tails. Vertical stabilizers are a feature of modern aircraft, specifically to prevent yaw instability during flight. Masiha built a scale model and tested it in a wind tunnel. It flew, not just glided. It flew with aerodynamic stability. A follow-up study by Dr. Shesh. Masiha proposed that a horizontal tailpiece was originally part of the design but had been lost. With that piece added back in models, the flight characteristics became even more sophisticated. Egypt in 200 BC had no concept of powered flight according to standard history, and yet this object demonstrates knowledge of aerodynamic principles that were not formally documented in Western science until the 19th century. In 1961, in Olancha, California, a geode was cracked open by rockhounds Mike Mikesell, Wallace Lane, and Virginia Maxey. Inside what appeared to be a standard fossil-encrusted nodule, they found a cylinder of hard white ceramic material, surrounded by a hexagonal sleeve, which was in turn encased in a wooden collar that had been petrified. At the center of the ceramic cylinder was a shaft of metal. The nodule's exterior contained fossils that are known to take at least 500,000 years to form. Electrical engineers who examined the object said its internal structure was consistent with a modern spark plug. X-ray analysis confirmed the interior contained the same type of steel alloy found in contemporary spark plugs. The object became known as the Koso artifact, or the Olancha artifact. Skeptics have argued it is simply a 1920s champion spark plug that was encrusted in hard-pan calcium deposits, not a true geode, meaning the 500,000-year timeline may not apply. But the calcium carbonate crust was chemically analyzed, and estimates ranged from a minimum of 500 years to tens of thousands of years, depending on environmental conditions. The debate has never been fully resolved, and the artifact now sits in a private collection with no further academic testing permitted. We are now at the midpoint of this story, and the discoveries only get more difficult to explain. If you want to see what happens when we go even deeper into forbidden archaeology, subscribe and hit the bell. The next 4 will break your understanding of the ancient world. The Nazca lines of southern Peru cover an area of roughly 450 square kilometers in the Pampa Colorado Desert. They were made by the Nazca people between approximately 500 BC and 500 AD by simply removing the reddish pebbles on the surface to reveal the lighter ground beneath. The lines include over 700 geometric figures, 300 biomorphs shaped like animals and humans, and more than 10,000 individual lines. One of the animal figures, the hummingbird, is 93 meters long. The condor stretches 134 meters from wingtip to wingtip. These proportions are only correct when viewed from the air. At ground level, they are incomprehensible. German mathematician Maria Rieke spent over 40 years, beginning in 1946, mapping and preserving the lines. Her analysis showed they functioned as a massive astronomical calendar. The problem is not just the scale, it is the precision. Survey analysis conducted by Professor Anthony Aveni in the 1980s showed some of the straight lines deviate by less than 2% over distances of 10 kilometers. That level of accuracy requires either advanced surveying technology or a method of aerial observation. Neither was supposed to exist in pre-Columbian Peru. The Nazca people had neither metal tools nor writing, and yet they built something that cannot be fully appreciated without leaving the ground. In 1995, archaeologist Yoji Arai was diving in the waters off Yonaguni Island, Japan, the westernmost point of the Okinawa prefecture. He found something that launched one of the most heated debates in modern underwater archaeology. A massive stepped stone platform sitting on the seafloor at depths between 5 and 27 meters. The main structure is approximately 250 meters long, 90 meters wide, and rises about 26 meters from the seafloor. It features perfectly flat terraces, right-angled steps, triangular formations, what appears to be an arch, and a carved road running along its perimeter. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus, spent 15 years diving the site and concluded it was an artificial structure, not a natural formation. He identified tool marks, drainage channels, and what he believed were carved faces. Critics, including Boston University geologist Robert Schoch, argued the formations are natural, shaped by the tectonic activity and layered sandstone typical of the region. But here is the number that ends the argument for many researchers. The Yonaguni monument, if artificial, was last above sea level roughly 10,000 years ago, placing its construction at the same time as the theoretical end of the last ice age. That means whoever built it was operating at a level of architectural sophistication that no known culture possessed 10,000 years ago. In 1968, during construction of a new road near the coast of North Bimini Island in the Bahamas, underwater divers Joseph Valentine, Manson Valentine, and Jacques Mayol discovered something 3 to 5 meters below the surface of the ocean floor. A half-mile-long formation of large, flat, rectangular limestone blocks arranged in a curved J shape. The blocks are up to 5 meters long, 4 meters wide, and vary in thickness. They are laid in a formation that local geology does not explain because the substrate beneath them is not continuous limestone bedrock. In 1978, geologist Eugene Shin drilled core samples from the blocks and found that the limestone matched that of the surrounding seafloor, leading him to argue the formation was natural beach rock that fractured into regular shapes. But in 2004, geologists William Donato and Brigitte Zucha re-examined the site and found multiple layers of stones stacked on top of each other, impossible to explain by natural fracturing of beach rock, which always lies in a single layer. They also found evidence of tool cuts in some blocks. The Bimini Road, as it is called, sits at a depth that suggests it was above water somewhere between approximately 5,000 and 15,000 years ago. No acknowledged civilization existed in the Caribbean capable of stone construction at the time. The last discovery on this list has been sitting in a museum since 1912. Almost no one outside of Russia knows about it, and almost everyone who does know about it disagrees about what it is. The Arkaim complex, located in the Chelyabinsk Oblast of Russia, about 400 kilometers south of Yekaterinburg, was discovered in 1987 by archaeologist Gennady Zdanovich during a routine excavation before the site was to be flooded for a reservoir. What Zdanovich found was a perfectly circular Bronze Age city measuring exactly 510 meters in diameter, made up of 2 concentric rings of dwellings, each ring separated by streets, drainage systems, and a central square. The outer wall was 5 meters thick and 6 meters tall. The city housed approximately 1,500 to 2,500 people. Every dwelling had running water delivered through a log pipe system, fire pits, metallurgical furnaces, and ventilation shafts built directly into the floor. The furnaces showed evidence of sophisticated iron and bronze metallurgy. Arkaim dates to approximately 3,800 to 4,000 years ago, making it contemporary with the great cities of Mesopotamia and predating classical Greece by over 1,000 years. The problem is that nomadic, supposedly primitive Indo-European people who populated that region at that time were not supposed to have this level of urban planning. Archaeoastronomical analysis by Russian researchers showed the entire city was oriented along precise astronomical alignments, functioning simultaneously as a dwelling space, a metallurgical facility, and an astronomical observatory. The Soviet government tried to have the site flooded as originally planned. Citizens and researchers physically blocked the bulldozers and prevented it. Boris Yeltsin personally intervened and canceled the reservoir project in 1992. Now connect the dots across all 8 of these discoveries. London, Texas gives us a metal hammer in 500 million year old rock. Antikythera gives us a 1,400-year technological leap compressed into a single bronze device. The Saqqara bird gives us aerodynamic knowledge encoded in 2,000-year-old wood. The Koso artifact gives us something electrically functional sealed inside what appears to be ancient stone. The Cuban underwater city gives us architecture at a depth that puts its construction tens of thousands of years before known civilization. The Nazca lines give us astronomical precision across 450 kilometers of desert with no writing and no metal. Yonaguni gives us megalithic architecture that was above water 10,000 years ago. Bimini gives us a half-mile stone road in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Every single one of these sites has been actively studied by credentialed researchers. Every single one has received less mainstream coverage than a minor celebrity scandal. The pattern is not conspiracy. The pattern is institutional inertia. When a discovery challenges the foundation of an established discipline, the system defaults to minimization, funding denial, and strategic silence. Derek de Sola Price said it himself in 1974 after years of analyzing the Antikythera mechanism. He wrote that the knowledge of this device died with the ancient Greeks, and that the existence of such a device forces us to ask whether our understanding of ancient technology is entirely mistaken. He published those words in Scientific American. They were largely ignored. In 2010, researchers using multispectral imaging on the Antikythera mechanism found hidden text on its surface, over 2,000 individual characters describing the movements of the planets. A user manual for an ancient computer. The text was in Corinthian dialect, pointing to origins in Syracuse around 250 BC, the time and place of Archimedes. No one has proven Archimedes built it, but no one has proven he did not. Polina Zalitsky, the ocean engineer who found the Cuban underwater city, died without completing her exploration of the site. The equipment she needed to return cost more than her team could raise independently, and no major oceanographic institution provided support. Her sonar records, interviews, and preliminary findings are publicly available. The structures she documented in 2001 have not been formally excavated. They are still down there, 65 stories below the surface of the Caribbean Sea, perfectly silent. The Arkaim complex was eventually dated more precisely using dendrochronology and radiocarbon testing. The most precise date cluster places habitation between approximately 1,900 and 1,700 BCE. That means this circular, astronomically aligned, hydraulically sophisticated city in the Russian steppe was functioning at the same moment that the Minoan civilization was at its peak in Crete, and Moses, according to religious texts, was leading the exodus from Egypt. 3 completely separate civilizations, on 3 completely separate continents, were reaching peak sophistication simultaneously. Standard history teaches a slow, linear march of progress, from primitive to modern. The 8 sites on this list teach something different. They teach that complexity has appeared, vanished, and reappeared multiple times in human history. They teach that we have a catastrophically incomplete picture of our own past. The London hammer, the one in that Texas museum, has never been officially dated by carbon testing of the wood in its handle. The Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, which currently holds the hammer, has declined to allow independent dating. The Cretaceous-era rock formation around it has been cited by both young Earth creationists and mainstream critics as evidence for radically different conclusions. Neither side has fully explained the iron composition of the hammerhead, which was analyzed in 1985 by metallurgist analysis and found to contain no carbon, meaning it could not have been produced by medieval smelting methods, which always introduce some carbon into the iron. Pure metallic iron of that composition requires either meteoric origin, which produces a different crystalline structure than what was observed, or a smelting process more advanced than anything the ancient world was supposed to possess. 7 of the 8 sites covered in this video have been formally examined by at least one PhD-level researcher who concluded the mainstream explanation was insufficient. Not fringe bloggers, not YouTube channels. Credentialed scientists who published their findings and were met with career consequences. In 2022, a team from the University of Barcelona published new magnetic resonance analysis of the Antikythera mechanism and confirmed it tracked the moon's precise elliptical orbit, not a circular approximation. The mathematical model required to encode that orbit was not formally described in Western science until Johannes Kepler published his first law in 1609 AD. The Antikythera mechanism was built approximately 1700 years before Kepler was born. The hammer is still in the museum in London, Texas. The city is still on the seafloor off Cuba. The bird still flies in every wind tunnel test. The lines are still only readable from the sky. The road is still under 3 to 5 meters of Caribbean water. The monument is still beneath the waters of the East China Sea. The circle is still on the Russian steppe, facing the stars it was built to watch. And somewhere in the corroded bronze of a mechanism pulled from a Greek shipwreck in 1901, 17 centuries of so-called human progress had already happened once before.